By the time the elevator doors opened on the 31st floor, the security passes for the entire 12th floor had already been deactivated. Nobody on that floor knew it yet. That was the part that stayed with people afterward. Not the firing itself, not the boardroom, not even the moment when Oliver Carter walked back through the front doors of Meridian Solutions wearing a different jacket and a different name tag. What stayed with people was the silence between those two things. The 4 hours when everything had already been decided, and no one below the executive suite had any idea. Oliver had spent 11 years building Meridian from a 2-person consulting firm operating out of a shared office in Kitchener into one of the largest infrastructure advisory companies in the country. He had opened the Vancouver office in 2019, the Calgary branch in 2021, the Ottawa satellite team the following spring. He was methodical about growth in the way that some people are methodical about almost nothing else in their lives. Careful, unhurried, precise. He did not announce expansions. He executed them. The decision to spend 3 weeks embedded in the Toronto headquarters as a contract analyst had been his alone. He had not told his assistant. He had not told legal. He had told one person, his CFO, a careful man named Gordon Beale, who had been with the company since the Kitchener days, and only because Gordon needed to know why certain budget line items would look unusual. 3 weeks, Oliver had said. I want to see what the culture actually looks like. Gordon had looked at him the way Gordon always looked at him when he thought something was unnecessary. You could just read the engagement surveys. I have read the engagement surveys, Oliver said. That's why I'm going in. The engagement surveys for the Toronto headquarters had been declining for 18 months. Slowly at first, 2 percentage points here, 3 there, and then more sharply in the last 2 quarters. The numbers were still within a range that most executives would consider acceptable. Oliver did not consider them acceptable. He had built Meridian on the premise that people who felt trusted did better work, and the surveys were telling him, in the careful language of anonymized data, that something in Toronto had shifted, that people had stopped feeling trusted. He came in as Owen Gallagher. The name was plausible, common enough to be forgettable, specific enough to pass without comment. He arranged for a clean employment record through the firm's HR intake system, flagged internally only to Gordon. He sat in a workstation on the 12th floor, which housed the Infrastructure Analytics Division, and he spent the first week doing exactly what a mid-level contract analyst would do. He read files. He asked reasonable questions. He submitted work on time. What he saw in that first week was not catastrophic. It was something quieter than catastrophe, and in Oliver's experience, quiet things were almost always more dangerous. The 12th floor was run, functionally, by 3 people who did not hold the titles that would have reflected their actual power. Brenda Carruthers was a senior project coordinator who had been at Meridian for 6 years. She had the corner workstation, the loudest voice in any meeting, and an unmistakable habit of positioning herself between junior analysts and anyone above her on the org chart. Beside her, in terms of informal authority, was a man named Terrence Falk, lean, quick-talking, the kind of person who always seemed to know what decision had been made before it was announced, because he had a habit of being present in the right conversations at the right time. The third was a woman named Simone Vachon, who handled reporting and who had, Oliver noticed within his first 48 hours, developed a system for summarizing other people's work in her own name. None of them were incompetent. That was important to understand. They were each skilled enough at their own functions that their behavior had gone unchallenged, or perhaps unnoticed, for long enough to become structured. It wasn't about one bad actor. It was about a pattern that had been allowed to calcify. The analyst beneath them had adapted. Oliver watched that adaptation with something close to grief. A young woman named Priya Nambiar, sharp, the kind of analyst who caught errors that the modeling software missed, had taken to submitting her work with almost no annotations. When Oliver asked her once, casually, why she kept her methodology notes so sparse, she shrugged and said it was just easier that way. She did not elaborate. She did not need to. A man named Calvin Osei, who sat 2 desks away and who Oliver had clocked as one of the most technically capable people on the floor, had stopped raising his hand in team meetings entirely. He answered when spoken to. He produced excellent work. He did nothing that would draw attention. Oliver had seen that pattern before, had seen what it cost people over time, and it made something in him go still and purposeful. In the second week, Oliver began to understand the scope of it. The performance management system at Meridian allowed team leads to flag contributions for quarterly review. essentially a mechanism for noting which analysts had gone above and beyond and should be considered for advancement. It was a good system, designed with reasonable intentions. What Oliver discovered, working with the kind of quiet access that being invisible in a workplace affords, was that the contribution flags on the 12th floor had been flowing almost exclusively upward for the better part of a year. Priya's infrastructure risk model, the one that had caught a critical error in a provincial contract assessment and saved the company from a significant liability, was listed in the quarterly summary as a team initiative led by Brenda Carruthers. Calvin's longitudinal analysis on municipal utility planning, which had been referenced in 2 external reports, appeared in the project archive with Terence Falk's name in the lead contributor field. Oliver did not react to this when he found it. He wrote it down. He kept a plain notebook, not a laptop, nothing that could be mirrored or flagged, and he wrote things down the way he had always written things down, in the flat, declarative sentences of someone assembling a record rather than processing an emotion. At the end of his 2nd week, he flagged a potential anomaly in a data migration file to Simone, who was technically responsible for the integration review. It was a minor thing, a date formatting inconsistency that would likely resolve itself, but Oliver mentioned it because it was the kind of thing that should be mentioned. Simone thanked him, in the tone that senior people use when they are thanking someone they do not consider worth remembering, and then later that day Oliver heard her describe the catch to Brenda as her own. He wrote that down, too. The 3rd week began on a Monday. On Wednesday of that week, Oliver made an error, a real one, not manufactured. He had been running calculations on a transit corridor assessment and had imported the wrong version of a baseline file. The output was incorrect. He caught it before submission, corrected it, and filed the accurate version. He noted the error in his own log and moved on. Thursday morning, he was called into the small glass-walled office that Brenda Carruthers used for what she called alignment meetings. Terence Falk was already there. Simone Vachon was not present, but Oliver had the distinct sense that she was aware the conversation was happening. Brenda was not unpleasant in the way that bullies in stories are unpleasant. She did not raise her voice. She expressed concern. She referenced the data import error from the previous day, the one Oliver had already caught and corrected, and framed it as part of a pattern of performance concerns. She had a printed summary. It listed in precise language 3 other issues that Oliver did not recognize as having occurred. He asked to review the source documentation for those 3 items. Brenda said that the summary was based on team observations and that the specific files were being compiled. She said it in the tone of someone who had said it before, who knew that being compiled was a phrase that ended conversations rather than continuing them. "I'd like them compiled before any formal process moves forward," Oliver said. "That's not typically how our intake process works," Brenda said. Oliver looked at her steadily. "I understand." He went back to his desk. He sat for approximately 40 minutes. He completed the 2 tasks he had open. Then he received an email from the Meridian HR inbox, the Toronto HR inbox, not the corporate one, notifying him that his contract had been terminated effective immediately, citing performance deficiencies and a pattern of errors, and that he should prepare to return his access card. He read it twice. He closed his laptop. He found a cardboard box in the supply room and placed 3 things in it: a notepad, a pen, and a small photograph he'd kept on the desk for plausibility. He carried the box to the elevator. He rode it to the lobby. He handed his temporary access card to the security desk without being asked and walked out the front doors onto Front Street. It was 11:14 in the morning. The sky over downtown Toronto was the flat, even gray of a city that has decided it doesn't need to impress anyone. Oliver stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Then he took out his phone and called Gordon Beale. "I'm done," he said. "I'll be in the lobby in 20 minutes, Gordon said. Oliver walked half a block to a coffee shop, ordered a black coffee, and sat at a table near the window. He did not look at his phone. He did not make additional calls. He drank his coffee and watched the street and waited. Gordon arrived in 19 minutes, slightly out of breath, carrying a portfolio case. He sat across from Oliver and looked at the cardboard box and said nothing for a moment. "How bad?" Gordon said. "Systemic," Oliver said. "Not just management behavior. The performance record has been manipulated. I can point to at least 11 people whose contribution history has been altered or misdirected. Priya Nambiar's risk model from Q3. Calvin Osi's utility analysis. There are others. I want the full HR audit records for the 12th floor going back 18 months. Gordon opened the portfolio. "I brought the executive authorization forms." "Good." Oliver signed 3 of them in the clear, steady handwriting of someone who had been signing authorization forms for a long time. I want digital records locked by end of business today. No deletion, no archiving, preservation hold. I want IT flagging any access to personnel files from the 12th floor between now and Friday. The Toronto HR team. The Toronto HR team flagged my contract for termination based on a performance summary that contained fabricated incidents, Oliver said. Their files go under review as well. Gordon was quiet for a moment. Who else knows you were there? Just you. Gordon nodded. He made a note. Timeline? I'll be back in the building Friday morning. Arrange a full company meeting in the atrium for 10 o'clock. Everyone in the Toronto office. I want the results of the preliminary audit ready to present. That's 48 hours. I know, Oliver said. He finished his coffee. He thanked Gordon. He went home, showered, and spent the rest of Wednesday and all of Thursday working from the kitchen table of his condominium on King Street, reviewing the audit documents as they came in from the legal and HR teams, reading the preliminary IT forensics, going through the paper trail that 2 days of intensive internal work could produce when you had the authority to compel it. What the audit found was not surprising to Oliver, because Oliver had spent 3 weeks watching it happen in real time. But it was more documented than even he had expected. The performance summary that Brenda Carruthers had used to terminate his contract contained 3 incidents that had been drawn from a shared log she maintained, a log to which Terrence Falk also had access and had made entries, that functioned as a kind of informal disciplinary record, unconnected to the official HR system, used to build cases against people who had become inconvenient. 11 analysts on the 12th floor had been passed over for advancement in the preceding 18 months. All 11 had performance records that, when reconstructed from the underlying project files and client feedback, showed contribution levels that should have resulted in promotion or reclassification. All 11 had been managed at some point by Brenda Carruthers or someone in her immediate circle. The contribution records for Priya Nambiar and Calvin Osei specifically had been altered in the project management system, not deleted, because deletion left traces but attributed, moved, reassigned, relabeled. The IT forensics team found the access logs. They were clean and time-stamped and definitive. Oliver read all of it. He did not sleep well Thursday night. Not because he was distressed. He was not distressed. But because the accumulated weight of what he was reading sat in him in a way that sleep didn't easily accommodate. He thought about Priya's sparse annotations. He thought about Calvin not raising his hand. He was back at the Meridian building on Front Street at 9:45 Friday morning. The security desk in the lobby recognized him immediately. Not Owen Gallagher, Oliver Carter. The nameplate had been updated. His access card was waiting in an envelope with his name on it. He took the elevator to the 31st floor first, which was the executive floor, and met briefly with Gordon and with Meridian's general counsel, a composed woman named Adrienne Fothergill, who had been with the company 8 years and who had spent the last 48 hours doing what Adrienne always did under pressure, which was work quickly and say very little. The board has been briefed, Adrienne said. Brenda Carruthers, Terrence Falk, and Simone Vachon have been notified of an investigative hold on their access pending today's meeting. They're in the building. They don't know why. The Toronto HR director, Oliver asked. Marcus Webb, Adrienne said. He's been notified separately. His employment status is under review pending the audit findings. Oliver nodded. At 10 o'clock, he took the elevator to the atrium level. The Meridian atrium occupied the base of the building, a tall, open space with a glass ceiling that let in gray Toronto daylight and a low platform at the far end that was used for company announcements and the occasional all-staff presentation. By 10:05, most of the Toronto staff had assembled. There were perhaps 230 people. Some were standing. Some had brought coffee. Most looked mildly puzzled in the way that people look when they've been asked to gather for an unscheduled meeting and haven't been told why. Oliver stepped up onto the platform. There was a moment, brief, very still, when the room collectively realized who was standing there. It moved through the crowd not as a gasp or a murmur, but as a kind of physical recalibration, a subtle shift in posture and attention. Oliver had seen it before in rooms of various sizes, and he had never found it comfortable. He did not find it comfortable now. He saw Brenda Carruthers near the left side of the room. She had gone absolutely motionless. He saw Priya Nambiar standing near the back, a coffee cup in her hand, her expression careful and unreadable. He saw Calvin Osei a few rows forward from her, watching with the particular stillness of someone who has learned to be very quiet in public. Oliver did not use notes. "My name is Oliver Carter," he said. "I'm the founder and chief executive of Meridian Solutions. For the past 3 weeks, I've been working on the 12th floor of this building as a contract analyst under a different name." He let that settle. "I want to explain why. 18 months of engagement data told me that something had changed in this office. People had stopped contributing ideas in meetings. Output was high. The technical work coming out of this building has been, in many cases, exceptional, but the people producing that work had gone quiet. And in my experience, when talented people go quiet, it's not because they've run out of things to say. It's because they've learned that saying things costs them something." He paused. "What the audit has found in the last 48 hours confirms what I observed directly over 3 weeks. A small number of people in positions of informal authority on the 12th floor systematically redirected credit for work they did not do, fabricated or exaggerated performance concerns about analysts who posed a competitive inconvenience, and used an unofficial parallel documentation system to manufacture grounds for termination when those analysts became difficult to suppress." The atrium was very quiet. 11 people in this room were passed over for advancement they had earned. I want to say that plainly. Not advancement they might have been considered for. Advancement they had earned, and that was withheld through deliberate misrepresentation of their records. He looked at Priya Nambiar. She was watching him steadily now. The infrastructure risk model that prevented a significant liability on the Dorchester provincial contract last September was not a team initiative. It was built by one analyst independently in 3 weeks of work that was submitted without annotation because she had learned it was safer that way. He did not say her name. He did not need to. That work will be correctly attributed. Her record will be correct. Her compensation will be adjusted retroactively. He looked at Calvin Osei. The municipal utility planning analysis that was referenced in 2 external industry reports will have its lead contributor accurately recorded. That analyst's advancement file will be reopened and reviewed against his actual contribution history, not the summary version. He let that land. He saw something move across Calvin's face. Not relief exactly, and not surprise. Something quieter than either of those. Brenda Carruthers, Terrence Falk, and Simone Vachon have been notified that their employment's terminated effective this morning, pending formal review. They will be escorted from the building after this meeting. The investigation into falsified records may result in additional legal proceedings. That determination is ongoing. He did not look at Brenda when he said this. She remained motionless. Marcus Webb, who served as HR director for this office, is under separate review for his role in processing termination and performance documentation that he should have flagged as procedurally irregular. That review is being conducted independently. Oliver stepped back slightly on the platform. "I want to be clear about something. What happened here was not exceptional in the sense of being rare. It is a failure mode that appears in organizations that grow quickly and don't maintain the right oversight mechanisms. The responsibility for that is mine. I should have had better structures in place. I am telling you this not as a formality, but because I think the people in this room, especially the people who spent the last 18 months doing excellent work while being systematically undermined, deserve an accurate account of what went wrong and why." The silence in the atrium had a different quality now. "We will be implementing a redesigned performance review process with mandatory cross-referencing against project records. We will establish a direct reporting channel to the executive level for contribution concerns, with a guaranteed independent review. Any analyst whose record was affected by the findings of this audit will have their file reopened and reviewed on its actual merits. That process starts Monday." He looked at the room. "I know that what I've said today doesn't undo time. It doesn't undo the meetings where people stayed quiet because it was safer. It doesn't undo the contributions that went unrecognized for months. I'm not standing here to tell you that a corrected record makes everything right. I'm telling you what will change going forward, and I'm telling you that the people responsible for what happened are no longer in this building." He stepped off the platform. The room did not erupt. It wasn't that kind of moment. What happened was a low, dispersed sound. People exhaling, people beginning to speak quietly to the person standing beside them, the gradual decompression of a space that had been holding something compressed for a long time. Gordon Beale appeared at his elbow. 12th floor is asking if you'll come down. Give me 5 minutes, Oliver said. He moved to the edge of the atrium. Priya Nambiart reached him before he got there, threading through the dispersing crowd with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent 18 months navigating spaces without being noticed. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Oliver," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Did you know when you were on the floor that it was my model?" "Not until the end of the second week," he said, "but I thought it was yours before I could prove it. You caught a leverage calculation error in the Dorchester file that the modeling software missed. I read it and thought, that's not a team." She was quiet for a moment. "I stopped annotating my work," she said. "I thought if I explained less, they couldn't take it as easily." "I know," he said. "It didn't work." "No," he said. "It didn't. I'm sorry it took as long as it did." She nodded. She did not say it was fine, which Oliver respected. Calvin Osei found him a few minutes later, near the edge of the crowd. Calvin was a man who moved deliberately, who gave the impression of someone who measured the distance before each step. "I have a question," Calvin said. "Go ahead. When they terminated you, as Owen, you could have said something then." "Yes," Oliver said. "Why didn't you?" Oliver considered this. It was a reasonable question. Because if I had identified myself in that moment, the conversation would have been about me, about my authority, my identity, what I was doing there. The evidence would have been secondary. He paused. I needed the evidence to be primary. Calvin looked at him for a moment. The utility analysis. There are 3 additional sections I didn't submit because I didn't think they'd be credited. "Send them to Gordon Beale," Oliver said. "Today if you can." Calvin nodded once, in the way of someone who is accustomed to not being heard and is therefore not yet certain how to respond to being heard. He stepped back into the dispersing crowd. Oliver took the elevator to the 12th floor. The floor was quieter than usual. About half the staff were still in the atrium or returning from it. The other half stood in the open workspace in small clusters, speaking in the low, careful voices of people who weren't sure yet what kind of day this was going to be. He walked to the middle of the floor and asked, without raising his voice, if people would gather. They did. It took a few minutes. Someone pulled over a chair. Oliver waved it off and stood. "I spent 3 weeks sitting about 15 feet from where I'm standing now," he said. "I want you to understand that I'm not here because I think you need a speech. I'm here because you watched things happen on this floor for a long time, and you're probably wondering whether that changes anything, what I saw and what I didn't see." He looked at the assembled faces. Most of them were watching him carefully, some with wariness, a few with something more open. "I saw the annotation practice," he said. "I saw what happened in the Wednesday afternoon briefings. I saw the contribution log." He did not elaborate. He did not need to. The people in the room knew what they had lived. What I saw was a floor full of people doing serious work under conditions that made serious work harder than it needed to be. That's what's going to change. A woman near the back, one of the junior analysts' early career, someone Oliver had not had a direct interaction with during his 3 weeks, raised her hand. "Will the performance reviews, the ones from the last year and a half, are those going to be corrected in our records?" "Yes," Oliver said. "All of them. Individually. Not as a batch revision, each one reviewed against the actual project record." She nodded, processing. Another analyst, a man Oliver recognized as one of the quieter members of the floor's data team, asked, "What happens if the same pattern shows up somewhere else in the company? Tell me. Or tell Gordon Beale, or tell Adrian Fothergill directly. There's a reporting mechanism being put in place, but I'd rather you didn't wait for a formal mechanism. If you see something that looks like what happened here, you tell someone in the executive chain, and I will personally review it." He paused. "I know that might sound like the kind of thing people say and then don't mean. I understand why you'd be skeptical. All I can tell you is that I spent 3 weeks on this floor because engagement numbers were declining, and I'm standing here on a Friday morning because what I found was worse than I expected. I take that seriously. Not as a policy matter, as a personal one." He stayed on the 12th floor for another 40 minutes. He did not hold court. He moved through the space, spoke with people in small groups, answered the specific and practical questions that people had when the adrenaline of a large announcement faded and the actual operational reality began to settle in. He answered honestly. He said, "I don't know yet," 3 times, which was accurate, and he wrote down 2 things that analysts told him that he hadn't known before. Because you learned things in 40 minutes of actual conversation that you couldn't learn in any audit. Before he left, he stopped at the workstation where he had spent 3 weeks as Owen Gallagher. Someone had already cleared it. The desk was bare. He stood there for a moment. He thought about Priya's sparse annotations and Calvin's unsubmitted sections, and the careful blankness with which people had learned to move through a space that should have been safe and wasn't. He thought about the engagement surveys, declining by 2 percentage points, then 3, in the careful language of anonymized data. He turned and walked to the elevator. On the 31st floor, Gordon Beale was waiting with a coffee and a question. "How was the floor?" Gordon asked. "Good," Oliver said. He accepted the coffee. "Better than I expected. In what sense?" Oliver thought about this. "They're still there," he said. "That's the sense I mean. They came through 18 months of that, and they're still there, still asking the right questions, still wanting the work to matter. That's not nothing." Gordon nodded. He understood what Oliver meant, which was one of the reasons Oliver had kept Gordon Beale around for 11 years. The independent HR review ran through the following week and into the one after. Oliver read every report personally. Each of the 11 analysts had their records corrected in writing, with a formal acknowledgement of the discrepancy and a documented explanation. 9 of them were advanced or reclassified. 2 were placed in a 6-month accelerated development track at their own request. Priya Nambiar's risk model was retroactively credited in the Dorchester project documentation and cited in an internal case study on methodology with her name on it. Calvin Ossie submitted the 3 additional sections of his utility analysis on the Friday afternoon. By the following Wednesday, the expanded paper had been sent to an external industry publication with his name as lead author. Brenda Carruthers, Terrence Falk, and Simone Vachon did not contest their terminations. Adrian Fothergill's team referred the falsified documentation findings to an external review body. Whether that review would result in further proceedings remained to be determined. Marcus Webb resigned before the HR review concluded. Oliver flew back to Vancouver on a Tuesday. He sat in a window seat and looked at the grid of Toronto below him as the plane climbed, and then the grid gave way to cloud, and there was nothing to look at but the flat gray nothing of altitude. He opened his notebook, the plain one with the flat declarative sentences, and on a new page wrote 2 words. Then he closed it. The work, as it always did, continued.